and potentially a tax credit. We're still working on some of the elements and to what extent that would be refundable or non-refundable. And my assessment is that those tax credits would allow people's health insurance to move with them from job to job, from state to state, and then that will ultimately yield better health care.
The real ledger on YouTube.
So, new house number 858. 858? Someone have 858?
Yeah, go ahead.
858? Waiting. You have it? Step right up.
Daddy paid for his.
Do you have your ticket? Great. Thank you very much. Go right ahead with your question.
I've lived here my entire life for 17 years, and you didn't quite answer that question about how you can justify, like, getting rid of the EPA. That'll ruin our bayous. Bayou Sahar, it's not fully recovered yet from all of the pollution. The project to get it recovered is going well, but if you get rid of that, then it's gonna be destroyed.
Where we agree is that the environment has to be a priority and that we have to have a regime in place that protects the environment. Where we disagree is what is the best way to achieve that outcome. And so you may not have heard my response to the last question about that. Well, I can barely hear it, but so I wouldn't blame you. But my belief is that the $8 billion we're currently spending on the EPA is not appropriately utilized to be able to really get in and punish polluters. Imagine a world that... Yeah. Well, that is the solution that I offer. The solution I offer...
You need to elaborate. We don't know what that means.
Okay, well let me elaborate to the best extent I can. First thing we gotta do is we gotta take the $8 billion that's being spent by the EPA, and we've gotta get all of the value out of that money to help the environment. One way we do that is by empowering more robust local enforcement of high federal standards. And we can do that if we would take that money and actually use it for the things that would help the environment. That's my answer. That's my paradigm. It's not overly complex. Who's got 891? 891? Can I get your ticket? Great, thanks. Thanks.
So on your website, I see you have HR 193. Are you endorsing that, sir? HR 193 about pulling out of the United Nations?
Yeah,
So, given the U.S.'s failure to join the League of Nations in the 1920s being a huge contributing factor to World War II, and the current rise in nationalism, rightist nationalism in Europe, and Russian aggression, do you think that sends a bad sign to the world as a whole that the U.S. would pull out of essentially the governing body for the world as a whole? Do you not think that history repeating itself is not joining the League of Nations?
Yeah, I reject the premise that World War II was started by not joining the League of Nations. I think World War II was started as a consequence of... hold on, I'm trying to answer your question. I'm allowed to reject... I don't have to agree with the premise of the question. Yeah. Okay, I'll give you...
So, as a contributing factor, the big issue here is us pulling out of the United Nations as a sign to the world we don't support the world's governing body. So yes, the League of Nations is an example of us doing that, but I'm not equating the League of Nations and the United Nations to being the exact same entity, because clearly the League of Nations was flawed in various other ways. But do you not think it sends a bad sign, we're pulling out, and now, Russia and China have a permanent seat on the Security Council, and we're not there to fact check them?
So, I think, to answer your question, I think what sends a worse sign is to continue to support a globalist entity that is anti-US, that is anti-Israel, that doesn't stand up for human rights. And by the way, the United Nations funds terrorism throughout the world. And here's how. Yeah, I will. So the US tax dollar goes to the UN. The UN.
Where'd you get your education, Matt? Where did you get your education?
The U.S. does fund terrorism.
Yeah, so the U.S. tax dollar goes to the UN. The UN then appropriates that money to the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority then uses that money to preach the virtue of killing people. They do. And so I'm not going to stand for the U.S. tax dollar to go to fund a globalist organization that ultimately ends up supporting terrorism. I'll give you the last word.
So, I just want to clarify, are you implying that the U.S.'s participation in the United Nations is directly funding Hamas?
No, it's directly funding the Palestinian Authority, which then goes and generates recruitment for Hamas. Who has number 822? 822? 822. 822. Okay, sure, come on up.
The day is worth it. Like all of a sudden.
Thank you. Representative Gaetz, you mentioned that you wanted to take the $8 billion from the EPA and allow the empowerment of local government, correct?
Enforcement.
Yes. Well, that same local government with our local paper company that recently exploded has allowed that paper company to operate outside its permits for 30 years and pollute the local waterways, and the state of Florida and the state of Alabama kind of fight over who's responsible for cleaning up those waterways. So if our local governments will not stand up to industry, because of course jobs are at risk instead of the environment, I'm not sure that a federal oversight should be abolished in this case. Your response?
Well, if the EPA is the great panacea for environmental protection, they sure failed in cantonment. So, that would probably be my response. I also think that there's nothing wrong with having high standards with the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. My issue comes with so much of the money that is spent chasing around, a cattle farmer who wants to go and expand his pond rather than doing the important enforcement work for the environment. Who has number 774? 774? 774. Okay, step right up, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. First off, I'd like to ask you to withdraw Bill H.R. 861, which includes abolishment of the EPA. I understand what you're saying. You think that the local government and the state DEP would be better served to protect the environment. But having worked at the DEP, I know for a fact that they would not enforce current regulations. So I don't think that's a viable idea. And not to mention, the air, land, water, they don't know boundaries. From one state to the next, everything moves. So it's not going to be, it's not logical. So please just consider withdrawing the bill. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for your feedback, and also thank you for your service to our state as a state worker. Those are often thankless jobs. They're underpaid, and I'm grateful for your willingness to do it. I believe that if we appropriately resourced and funded our state and local government partners, you would see more robust enforcement than you're able to see now. Now, you make a correct point that water and air move across boundaries. They don't know political boundaries. That's why I support high federal standards, if we had more money for the Department of Justice to prosecute polluters, there are also existing enforcement tools within the Endangered Species Act, within the Clean Water Act, within the Clean Air Act that provide for. I'm sorry, sir. We're not going to do that. So what I think we can do is utilize some of the concurrent jurisdiction that other federal agencies have, that state government has, but also that private groups have. You know, one of the things we did in the Endangered Species Act, for example, was create associational standing so that groups like the Sierra Club and the Everglades Foundation could step up and bring injunctive actions and enforcement actions, and so those would remain in place subsequent to the passage of 861, which I'll decline in withdrawing. But thank you for your input. Who has